there's a lamp underneath an overhang on the back side of my house. This lamp is right above my back door. Each year, a bird will build a nest on top of that lamp. And there's not a lot of space. I've always marveled how the birds can fly in underneath the overhang, get into the nest, how their young, their babies end up flying away from that nest. It's always been amazing. I've never figured out how they could do it, but whenever I walk around my house in the spring and summer months, you can always see the nest begin to be built, and then the nest is built, and then soon enough, you'll see a mother bird in there on top of eggs, and then coming in to feed her babies. And it's just always been kind of one of those deals where you look forward to it. Every year you see that nest, and you see that bird. I've also always been amazed not only that they could do that, fly in there and feed their young and fly out and just fit into that underneath the overhang. But I've always thought it was also just spectacularly unbelievable that through storms and through wind and rain and all that, these nests have just stayed perched on top of that lamppost. Not once have any of those nests ever come down. Never. Every year, same nest or a nest on top of that same lamp, and through any storms, with the 100 or so storms we've had, and however long we've lived here, the birds have always been able to maintain their little family in that nest, and the nest have never come down. Well, this year, we had the same nest above that lamp, on top of that lamp, underneath the overhang. And every day I'd walk past there, and I'd look up there, and there's a little pigeon this year, and it always kind of cheers me up to see that. It's a very heartening experience to see that, and spring is here, and life is being renewed. It's very exciting. Now, between the back side of my house and my neighbors, there's a fence. And the fence is a wooden fence that has wooden slats on either side of like these not 2x4s, I guess they're 4x4s. I don't know if I explain this correctly, but it's a wooden fence where there's slats on either side of these big wooden, and you could you could lay your arm down between the slats that come up. So all along our fence, it's kind of cool, if you were small enough, had a little motorbike, it'd be kind of cool to ride around our yard, and it'd be kind of like being on the luge or bobsledding in the Olympics. It's that kind of deal. And but in between the slats, this year there was, I didn't know this until I walked by, and I noticed that there was a bird screeching at me, And I looked, and lo and behold, there was a nest in between those slats. Now this nest had nothing in it. It was just a bird's nest, and I guess maybe the bird I surmised that had built the nest might have been near, because really it was loud screeching. So, whatever. I kept walking. A few days later, I noticed that there were some blue eggs in there. Now I don't know much about birds, but I think I remember from when I was younger that blue eggs are robin's eggs. I think that's what I thought at the time, and I remember thinking, well, that's pretty neat. There's a bird that's built a nest in between there, and it actually, come to think of it, probably a pretty tight little place to build your nest. Secure on either side, up off the ground. And the nest was the slats are up higher than the nest by 3, 4, 5 inches. I don't know. So nice little protection from the wind and all that. And well, the eggs got laid there, and then over a period of weeks or whatever, one day I walked by, and I heard that screeching again, and I looked in there, and the eggs had hatched, and they were little babies, And I didn't know what kind of bird they were, but they were obviously some dark-colored bird. So I thought, well, again, robins. And the bird up on the lamp, the bird on the lamp maybe 10 feet away. That bird's a pigeon. Well, down here, looks like a robin. Well, a couple days later, as I was walking out there, I noticed that there was a robin sitting on top of the eggs sitting on top of the babies and I guess keeping them warm or whatever. And as I approached, the bird flew up off of the nest and did a immediate 180-degree turn in the air, landed on a branch, and got in this offensive posture and began to screech loudly. It was then that I noticed a second robin. And the second robin appeared out of nowhere and flew up on the fence, and I realized these two birds were telling me, stay away from their babies. No problem. I saluted them and went on about my business. Well, over the next week or two of watching this, I noticed that anytime now you got within 10 feet of that nest, 10 or 15 feet of that nest, that mother bird would fly up and eventually would get up in branches above my head and twice dive bombed right at me. And the bird's only the size of your hand, probably weighed only a pound. I don't know how much they weigh. But it was kind of frightening. This bird just zooming down at you. I'm thinking, can you get rabies from a bird? I don't know. So eventually, when I would come around that side of the house, I would just kind of, I would have kind of a wide berth around it. A much wider berth than normal. A couple times I was on the phone with people while I was outside talking, and I'd be on the phone, and they could even hear the birds screeching in the background as I was coming around the side of my house. Well, it was interesting because the pigeon, you could walk right by that pigeon. I mean, you could walk and get within 3 or 4 or 5 feet of the nest. Now, you'd be down below it, and the pigeon would just look at you. But that robin just protected those babies. Don't know if it's a species deal. Don't know if it was just specific to that bird, but that robin protected the babies. And was really, and it had built a nest in a really smart place, I thought. I mean, if I was a bird, that would have been a really cool place to build the nest. Protected on 2 sides for sure. And the sides it wasn't protected on had very long, and you could look right down that fence out of the way and see anything coming, like a cat or something like that, if you were worried about it. So really, pretty neat defensive place. And I thought, how smart, of the robin. And I thought, I wonder why other birds haven't built their nests there before. Since the whole time I've lived here, I've never seen it. And I noted also the difference between the pigeon and the robin. The pigeon was very kind of laid back and didn't seem to mind intruders. That robin was protecting those babies and offensively protecting them. Bravely, with courage, and just a total lack of fear, doing whatever that mother bird needed to do to protect her babies. So, last night we had a storm. And the storm that we had was the kind of storm which I don't even know that you can classify as a storm. It was we'll just call it a weather event. It was a pretty bad deal. And a lot of damage to a lot of homes. So I went outside this morning, and one of my first thoughts was how the birds fare. I mean, I see them every day. I'm always out there looking at these birds. It's fascinating. It's a invigorating feeling every year to see these birds and they're young and the renewal and the rebirth and all that. And so I looked up, and the pigeon was hanging out with her babies. And the interesting thing is, where that nest is at a very high point, not protected by anything but the overhang, but the overhang does not protect against anything coming sideways at the house. And what we had last night in the storm was definitely some sideways action at our house. But the pigeon was hanging out there, So I thought, well, let's go check out the robin. And I walked over to the robin's. As I was walking to the robin's nest, there was no screeching. There's nothing taking a defensive posture. I didn't hear any. There were a lot of birds out, but I didn't hear any noise. And I was kind of sad. I kind of figured what had happened, and I looked, and there looking in the nest, the babies were gone. They were dead. And I don't know how the nest was intact. Um, maybe it was they drowned, or I don't know. Who knows? I thought, that's very sad. It's just nature. Don't get me wrong. It is quote, just nature. But I was sad about it because I thought, that mother bird did everything it could to protect against intruders. And here I was never going to hurt those babies, but if I walked by, that bird would be defensive. And I thought, how cruel that the bird that never cared, the bird that never ever cared, just let me walk right up and look at it. That bird never moved. And that bird, the babies lived. But the bird that cared and put its life on the line to protect her babies, those babies did not live. I thought that was incredibly sad. I also thought it was a metaphor for life. I thought, you hear about the arbitrary nature of life. And here you have this bird building a nest in a very defensive area, protected, and the winds could have blown like crazy, and unless that fence lifted off, that nest wasn't going to go anywhere. But the bird that perched just on top of a lamppost, that's the nest that the babies lived, but the nest protected by a mother who fought vigorously, and in a very defensive place, they drowned, and the mother's efforts were all for naught. And I thought about this. I thought about the grand scheme of life. I thought about everything it meant to be a parent, to love your children and protect your children. I thought about all the times I walked by, and I know that these are just animals I'm talking about, and many of you might find this maybe a comical, maybe I'm looking too deeply into this, but I felt like I had a relationship with that mother. I felt like I had a relationship with those babies, and it was an honor for me, and I tipped there was a time the other day where I literally said, I tip my hat to you, because that mother bird was so protective. And I got my camera out, and I took a picture of the pigeon, and I took a picture of the nest of the with the babies that were dead. I actually took a picture the other day of the nest with the babies in there, more than one picture. And then I took a picture of the pigeon, and I took a picture of the babies. And as I was walking away from the babies, not even 2 feet away on the ground, right in front of the bird nest, was the mother bird, the mother robin. Right there. That mother never left her young. Never, as the storm raged, that mother never left the side of her children. Was there to protect her children to literally the very end. And I saw that, and it was a very touching moment. I looked at it, and I thought for a second, it is true what they say. It's true what it says in the Bible. It rains on the just and the unjust. Sometimes you can do all that you want, do all that you can, and in the end, your efforts are for a reason that may not include the reasons that you believe them to be for. And a lot of times you can work as hard as you want, and in the end, we all literally are just here for a very short period of time. And it dawned on me that it does rain on the just and the unjust, and it also rains on just birds. It rains on all of us. And I stepped back and looked at that, and I reflected on my family, and I reflected on how fortunate I am to have the opportunity to do the things that I do. And all those things, that you think about. There, but for the grace of God, go I, for example. Really brought that home. It was one of those moments where a lot of things converged at once, but I felt like I should share this message with you. One of the things I talk about in the videos I do is I try to have everything come back down to a central theme. The central theme I like to talk about is that everything is a metaphor for something else in life. Those birds are a metaphor for something else in life. And what that is in your life, I don't know. I do know, and I do hope, and I do pray that whatever you're going through, you will find a way to do as the Serenity Prayer, which many of you may have heard, would admonish us to do. Oh God, give us the serenity to accept what cannot be changed, the courage to change what can be changed, and the wisdom to know one from the other. If I can give you any words of advice today, no matter what you do, no matter how you do it, no matter where you go, try to find the serenity to accept those things you can't change. Be courageous and change that which you can change. And pray for wisdom to know the one from the other. Thanks for listening. See you next video.